recording. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Tabb. I'm the instructor for editing for films, games, and animation. It includes teleplays and screenplays. I'm happy to be of service to you. We have no scenes that have been asked by any of the students for us to go through. So I'm going to just simply open it up for questions, and I will not leave until I've answered all your questions. There are no dumb questions, only dumb teachers. So, who don't know the answers, but hopefully I will know the answer to everything. Usually I do. That's the horrible thing about being a teacher. You think you know everything. Um, all right. I open the floor. Feel free to unmute your microphone if you have a question and ask away. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Nope.
Good evening.
There we
Um,
go. There we go.
I
All
do.
right. All right.
Can you hear me?
Andre, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Hope everyone is well tonight. I do have a couple of questions. One
Yes.
is something that I think I struggle with when it comes to the characters and what, as far as an expression, as far as a facial expression, and how to describe that. And I'm talking like excitement, and what that character would, how that character would act out excitement versus a look of shock or surprise, which it would seem because we've been taught to let an actor do what an actor does. And I
That's
would
right.
assume that any actor knows what a look of excitement should be. And if they're looking at, reading for a specific character, they should be able to get that. So how can, how do you,
How
how
do
do I
I
differentiate?
devoid emotion from the written script while keeping it clear what the actor is doing and how they're reacting to information if it's important? First of all, I don't put reactions by people unless it's important to the story. Like for example, when somebody gets a new piece of information, I don't tell people how to. I don't tell my actors how to reply to it, but I will sometimes. There's always one time in a scene, which is why you have a specific scene. Every scene is written to to have a specific twist happen in the scene, where either a piece of information is given or some twist is revealed, and something happens that's like that oh no moment, or that oh wow moment, or that there's a moment that where things change. Otherwise, there would be no progression in the scene, meaning that there would be no reason for the scene. So when that beat happens and something happens, I will put in the dialogue at the moment when everything changes. I will sometimes put the word beat, which means the actor, and I only will use the word beat once in a scene, if I use it at all. And that would signify the turning point in the scene in which an actor would realize something has been said that would change their input. Or would change the way they're thinking. Sometimes it changes if you've written it well. That piece of information will actually change what they want in the scene. So that's really important. Now, when it is important that a character is doing something, I try to keep it purely physical because look, you can tell if somebody's sad, but there are a million different ways you could imagine somebody being sad, and one of them would indicate one sense of reality, and another would be a completely different. So, I mean, somebody can be sad but be devastated and be sobbing, and another person can be sad and be staring off into space and despondent. Um, so I just try to be specific. Somebody sobs in the corner. You know, if somebody is excited, I mean, if they're a child, they're literally they leap up and down on the balls on their toes. You know, you can have a kid do that. You know, you can write that. It's a physical action, and when somebody's leaping up and down excitedly, like excited, you wouldn't say excitedly, but you can say leaping on their toes with a smile from ear to ear. You know that they're happy as heck. You know, you just tell us what you see. But then again, you know, you just want to make sure that whatever it is you're telling somebody to feel, that it's important that they're feeling that for the scene to progress. If that feeling doesn't actually change the way the next line is said or change the way the scene is going, literally in the dialogue you write and the action that happens, then really what you're doing is you're telling the actors things they don't need. And those are decisions you could have left to your actor. Look, the reason why it's so important to leave decisions to your actor isn't because we don't know what's supposed to be going on. But let's be honest. sometimes the character of a headmaster in a school, it could be played by anybody from Maggie Smith to to uh, 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 to Jack Nicholson, and each one of those people would look at a role in a series of circumstances and escalations, and each one of them would do that role differently. And you could only let an actor play the role how they follow their instincts. So where one actor would do it with a smirk and wry, and another one would whisper and be soft, each one would find the way that best suits how that actor could bring the intensity and the moment and the feeling and the story and the way they want to do the character to light. If you pigeonhole a perception of how an actor is supposed to do a scene, you are giving the actor no room to fall in love with the part because you're not giving them any room to make it theirs. An actor wants to make the role theirs. They want to have a script and idea, and they want to have the drama and the escalations and the plot and the story and all these things they get to do. They want if they're doing these high wire acts or whatever, or special effects and giant gun battles and stuff, that's all cool and well. But each actor also wants the freedom to do it how they've always wanted to do it. Not how you pictured them doing it, but they want the freedom to bring what they think to the character. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but I don't know if many of you know who Crispin Glover is. He's a very famous actor who is very unique. He did a movie called, he was in Back to the Future as the original dad in Back to the Future, and then they replaced him with another actor who looked like him for part 2, and then actually did makeup on his face, and then he wound up suing them. But he was in that. He's been in a number of movies. But what I love to remember him is doing, and he's done a lot of great movies and a lot of phenomenal character parts, is the movie Charlie's Angels. Now, it's a fun action movie. I'm not saying it's the best script ever, but I don't know if you ever saw it. But if you saw Charlie's Angels, Crispin Glover is the guy with the dark hair who's hunting the girls, and he's the one when he gets rips out a piece of the girl's hair, he stops and he smells her hair and he loves it, right? That's stuff he came up with. And originally, in the original script, a lot of people don't know this, but that character had a lot of lines. He was a valuable bad guy. He was a henchman, and he had a lot of dialogue in it. And Crispin Glover looked at the script as he was acting it and say, I could do all this without saying any of these words. And the actor asked if he could cut all the lines. He cut his own dialogue because actors like to have room to, and if they can do it without the words, then they want to do that because it's here. An actor's career is right here. This is it. And they have other things they do, and there's obviously other talents that you can have, but it's all how they perform, and you want to give your actor freedom. You want to give them room to interpret the role because they can read it, and you're writing it angry, but they could see the scene if you hadn't told them how to feel, and they could say, you know what, I don't like playing anger. Anger is a cheap emotion, and it's very easy to go to, and too many actors do it. Anger is one of the cheapest ways to write a scene. The only one worse than that is pity, because the worst thing is pity, because the only time you don't pity somebody in a horrible position is when they're so pitiful they pity themselves. Then we're annoyed with them. So pity's one I don't like to write, and anger is one that you want to give them the freedom, and you can write excited dialogue, and it sounds like they're angry, but you want to give the actor the option to read something, and they can read it and say, you know what, I can do it like this, and I can do it like this, and I can do it like this. And they can feel themselves bringing ideas to the material. That's when you excite an actor. An actor wants the freedom and the elbow room to make their role. You give them a blueprint, and then they give it flesh. There's a difference. So I just say, obviously, sometimes when a scene will be cued because somebody's sobbing and somebody comes over to see how they're doing and rub their back and care about them and all that stuff. So sometimes emotion is absolutely mandatory. I'm not saying it's never mandatory. I'm just saying don't micromanage. Give the actors the freedom, and if they don't need to be excited, you know, in a comedy, somebody will need to be excited and somebody will need to be on the opposite end of the spectrum to make funny. Like this person's excited about this person and this thing guy's stressed out. But you can sometimes convey that emotion fully through either what they're saying or how they're physically acting without having to ever mention emotion. So I don't know. That's a really long-winded answer for a very simple thing. Give the actor elbow room. And you don't need to tell them how to feel because they know. What's funny is a lot of the times an actor will have all these ideas for how to play a scene, but believe it or not, they're divinely intuitive actors. They feel the text and they feel it. They get what's going on in the scene. And sometimes they'll go, "Ooh, I could do it this way, and I could do it this way, and I could do it that way." And then when it comes down to the performing the scene on camera, in the end, when they're acting it, they feel the part. They really do. And they innately go originally where you intended. A lot of the time. Now, sometimes different actors are different ways. But a lot of the time, actors innately and emotionally, when they actually get up to do it, forgetting, they like having the freedom, but then when they perform it, if you've written it well, and you haven't told them what to feel, but the dialogue is clear, they will have to do it the way you imagined because that's the only way that text can be done and be truly effective and tell the story. And you don't have to tell them. They're intuitive. Does that answer your question, Andre?
Yes, it does.
You had other questions, so hit me.
I did have another one. And this one is probably as simple as the first one seems now. But slug lines and just say outdoor, if a person is on a different, they're outdoor on the street, and like just say in one scene they're walking down the street, but in two totally different neighborhoods. How would I? What's the best way to slug those?
So it's two people on the street in two different areas.
Yes.
You would want to say, for example, you'd want to really differentiate them and make it extremely clear. So you would you would try to look at what could be the opposites of the situation. You'd want to say visually, dynamically, how do I make two things that are the same look different? So first, obviously both EXT period because they're exteriors, they're outside. Now, one, you could put metropolitan streets. So you have somebody in the city, in buildings, horns blare, cars racing by, fighting traffic, trying to get across the street. And then the other guy, you could say he's in the ghetto or in the slums or he's in suburbia and they're birds chirping, you know? I mean, it's the exact, one's crazy, one's calm. You know, depending on the perspective of each character and where each one emotionally is will depend on the background so you can add subtext to where they're at. One of them could be in an office building and the other one could be at home. You know, you want to make sure the locations, one of the key things of the week one lesson, one of the first things I write about is picking the right location is really important because, you know, all four mediums that we're mainly writing, which is television, feature film, comic book, and games, all of them are visual mediums. So innately, in a visual medium, the visuals are important. And we're relying on the pictures to keep us excited and informed and questioning and wondering. And we want the pictures to kind of give us insight into what's going on inside because you can't tell us what's going inside. You can only do that in a novel. In a play, you have dialogue. And in these four mediums that we write in this program, you have to do it through visuals. That's the style of writing. So it's the exact opposite of a novel. Because in a novel, you write what people are feeling, what's in their head, what they're thinking. You can just get inside. And on stage, you can talk about everything. And you can use exposition and do all that stuff. Because everything's done through dialogue and Twitter, and it's great. But you chose the hardest one, which is you have to tell a story without actually saying it. You have to tell the story, but do it with the eye. And the eye should never be what the mouth is saying. Because that's what creates contrast and interest. You got to be over here and over here. You know, if two things are over here, then you really aren't using the spectrum of the idea. You're not giving people any subtext or diversity in image. You know, nowadays when I go see a movie and it's all one race of people in the cast, I get annoyed because there's no breadth, there's no diversity, there's no. It's like, how do you do this in a modern world? You know, we have to live together. We have to be diverse. We're responsible for telling stories of the world. Now, if we tell something historically, there's still, like what I love they did with the Robin Hood remake with Kevin Costner. Again, not the best film, but the idea was, I love them bringing Morgan Freeman in as a character. Because obviously, all different races existed in that time, and nobody ever used it. It was a bunch of white guys in that, in the original storytelling. So I love the fact that they did that. And, you know, anyway, so the visuals are the same way. You want the locations to somehow inform what's going on emotionally and mentally and set the stage for the characters. So if you're having two characters and it's an intercut scene between, like on a phone of some kind, that the backgrounds of the locations that they're in represent exactly what it is you want them to represent. So, for example, one guy could be in the penthouse looking out his window over Manhattan, and the other guy is literally in the sewers struggling for reception because some guy flushed something and he's trying to find a clue to something. And you have one guy literally in the sewers and the bowels and the crap. And you have another guy looking out his penthouse window with 3 beautiful girls in the bed. Or it could be the girl with 3 gorgeous guys in the bed. But the idea is you paint the picture that identifies the human being so that you don't have to say a guy is successful and you don't have to say he's rich. If you have him literally in a penthouse office with gorgeous people of the opposite gender serving them, a wait staff, and listening to classical music. You don't have to ever say he's rich. You've shown it. You don't have to say somebody's poor. If you put them in poor surroundings, you give them, they don't have hygiene, they have to break into somebody else's shower to use it. You don't need to say this person's homeless if you show him breaking into somebody's house and you think he's going to be a crook. No, he's a good person. He happens just to be homeless and he's literally breaking in to use their shower. And then if it's a comedy, of course, somebody walks in on him. It's okay. So just remember, the visuals are so important and so integral. The locations are literally the physical lifeblood of the world, the setting, and the characters you're trying to establish. That's why it's so important to pick a city that makes sense for the kind of story you're telling. If it's a romantic story, Paris, Tuscany, you know? You can even do Manhattan at Christmas. It's a little cliche now because there's so much Christmas in Manhattan that I don't know what you can come up with visually that wouldn't be a cliche we haven't seen a million times. So, you know. But,
Okay, now
go ahead.
that's awesome. I mean, it's awesome, but if I'm telling a gritty inner city story, then everything, I mean, there are different factions, but they are all inner city. So it's going to be an inner city backdrop.
That's fine.
Because
then one person's in the downtown district, in the business district, or if they're both in the slums, then different. One guy can be the kingpin of the slums. It's different where he is. There's slums, there's ghettos, there's you can have them on the streets, you can have them in a penthouse, you can have him walking through the alleys, the back alleys, in a dumpster, but you just want to make sure that there's a reason for them to be there. One person's walking through what are they called? The projects, and I've been watching the show again. I don't know if you've ever seen it, The Wire.
Yes.
The Wire's incredible. Okay, a lot of it takes place in the projects, but when you have the different characters, you have one guy in the center of the projects, and he's got a hub of guys around him, and while he's talking on the phone, he's giving people 5, telling somebody to wait while he's talking on the phone. He's always hustling. And then you have the other guy on the other edge of the phone, and he's sitting in some diner or whatever, or in a tiny office with wood paneling on the walls and frayed wallpaper. But at least it's different. One guy's the office guy, and one guy's the street guy. Does that make sense? So you still, even if they're both on the inner city, you've got them both in different locations that personify. This is the office guy. This is the dealer. This is the guy on the street. This is the guy in the office. When it's the cops, this is the guy in the precinct who doesn't leave his desk, and this is the guy out on the streets taking the pictures from the rooftop. You know, a lot of those scenes, you realize they're taking picture from a rooftop because they're on surveillance. But actually the scene, the dialogue scene that's happening has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they're taking pictures on a rooftop working surveillance.
Right.
That's just the job they're doing. And it's telling the audience who these guys are, what they do, without ever saying it. So locations are all about character identity, which is why it's so important to come up with characters who are diverse, specific, and have very, very unique places in any society from all the other characters with a name. You have to make them different and then be able to differentiate them through the visuals. One guy's wearing a suit, or at least a button-down shirt and slacks with his sleeves rolled up, and the other guy is in a hoodie with his hood up and his sunglasses on. You know, you get a sense that these guys are totally different, even if they're both in the projects. You're still visually identifying the difference between them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you have any other questions?
One more.
Sure.
Music. Should I just leave music alone and just let everybody else deal with that?
Yes.
I mean, okay.
If you're gonna, the problem with, look, as a new writer, the worst. Here's one of the things that this is my personal belief. Not everybody believes this, but in my personal opinion, as a new writer, you're trying to prove that you can master and tell a creative story, right? You're capable of telling the story. If you have to lean on somebody else's creative work in order for you to get your story across, that means you're not able to tell your story without other people. I like a fresh writer. You know, you could say, singing along with rap, with rap music or bouncing lyrics, or singing you can have a sexy song in the background. We're talking Commodores. You don't have to name a song, but you can give a tone if you want to. But I wouldn't pick specific. I try not to name a specific song unless literally it's crucial to the story. The people who can get away with that are the people who are already being paid by the studios and have already proven themselves. Quentin Tarantino can get away with that. Unfortunately, even Michael Tabb tries not to. And believe me, I've worked and I'm happy to have worked, but I still try to make sure that when I tell a story, I do it on my own merits and let the other creative people... There's a guy, specifically, there's a music coordinator who's hired for your film, and it's his job to find the music. And the director and him will come together and they will discuss what music best suits the story and helps elevate the beats of the movie. But you don't need to do that unless you're specific. Like, for example, if it's a scene where a guy's trying to seduce a girl and she's gone to the restroom or whatever, and he thinks he's coming out and whatever. There's the typical scene of he goes and he turns on the radio to a slow love song. He dims the lights. You can just say he turns on a love station. You don't need to specifically name the music.
Gotcha. That is all I have. Thank you.
Well, if you have more questions, feel free to chime in later. I'd like to open the floor for anybody else to ask any questions.
I was kind of wanting to talk about point of view.
Yes.
If that is okay.
Yes, Taylor. That's a very complicated issue to grab, and I'm glad you're asking. What are your thoughts or what are your questions?
Well, I'm going to send this link that I came across today if anybody's interested in reading either of those scripts. But Gone Girl uses two very distinct points of view to tell the story. And I'm writing a TV show, and I don't want to get sort of hokey with these different characters' points of view. I don't want it, because I'm trying to create an element of mystery with it, and I don't want to just have like these little snippets of scenes where this one mysterious character does something mysterious and then we move on. I'm kind of wondering how important it is for television to have the bulk of things be the main character's point of view, how ridiculous it is to have all these small other points of view.
Well, it's like when you look at a show like Big Bang Theory, there's a quartet of guys, and each of them will sometimes have their own storyline. But at the end of the day, I've always felt like it's Leonard's show. Um, if you have a drama, Mariska Hargitay, they've always had other leads and other people with scenes, and you delineate whose POV. Look, the point is that you tell the POV of the scene through the eyes of the most central character in the scene. It's not that they have to be in every scene, but it would go protagonist, antagonist, love interest, mentor, reflection character. So you can have a scene without the protagonist in it, but you can't. First of all, just don't forget the protagonist's perspective, so that we're seeing it through those eyes in a sense. But make sure that the central person we go into that scene through the POV of the most central character, the most central point of view that's in the scene. Because sometimes you'll have a good guy, you'll set this up, or you'll start a movie sometimes with a villain, and he sets up the drama that the whole movie is going to be about. He does something really, really bad. That's what bad guys do, you know. And you can start a movie without the hero, but personally, I prefer to start in with the hero, and you get into him or her, and get into their heart, and then you go on to the story.
Okay. I guess I'm struggling with a couple of the scenes that I have. Because this past week we were supposed to go through and edit it with POV in mind.
Yes.
And
it says in there that I believe the video says, it gives the hierarchy of who's the central character of the scene. Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm trying to really establish this character's disconnect, my main character's disconnect from everything, with what has happened to her, like, at the beginning of the show, because I'm trying to physically and emotionally isolate her towards the middle of the season of the show, I guess. And so I'm playing around with using other characters' point of view of the main character to sort of create an audience disconnect to that character. But I don't want to, I don't know, I'm struggling with it because I want the audience to love this main character and root for her, but I also want to explain
the only way you can show the disconnect is by showing it. Think of the character and what happens when you are not connected to somebody. For example, if you have a scene and this character is disconnected to what's going on, for example, one of the things you could do is they're sitting there watching what's going on, but you're with them and they're listening to a Walkman. Everybody else is going through this thing and they're on their phone playing a game. Everybody's talking and they're sitting in the other room watching TV, and the stuff's going on behind them, and you're with this character. They turn around and hear the laughter in the other room, and they see the handsome or beautiful person that they've always wanted to go talk to, which you've established, and you see them lean to get up, and then they freeze. And then they sit back down and they go back through their phone. You can have all that other stuff going on, but what's important is, like, for example, you can have people talking at the character. What film did this actually really well was, I don't know if you ever saw The Graduate.
Yes.
With Dustin Hoffman. In the beginning, he's really disconnected from everybody. When it opens with he gets out of college and he goes home. And everybody expects him to do something, and his parents throw this party for him, and his parents have all their friends, and there's all this mishigas going on, and he just totally just wants to tune everybody out. I would look at how they did that in that Mike Nichols film. I could see him in a scene like a character in a scene disconnecting, and people are talking to him, and he's just nodding, and he doesn't hear a thing they're saying. You can have people talking at him, but you can say no dialogue is heard. They're talking at him, music plays in his head, and he's just nodding. Literally, you're telling it through his perspective that he's totally disconnected.
Okay.
You don't need to tell everybody else's perspective of your hero. If you stick with them, you can show what other people think of them, and do it through a way that your hero is seen.
Yeah. So I guess my other question, which is more like character development rather than POV, I guess, with television, how, like, if I plan on having sort of minor, like, sub-storylines with other characters that aren't necessarily in every episode, how important is it to early on, like in the first episode, introduce or develop those characters?
If a character does not play a central role in the protagonist's pilot arc, and they are not an every episode character, get rid of them.
Okay.
That's what I do. I just finished. I'm in the middle of rewriting a pilot for a production company, and I had written in. There are two main characters. It's a buddy action adventure show, and there's the love interest, and then there was the one of these two guys' best friend, who's going to become the villain. Then there was a villain that he was running against for election, and then there was this really cool character we just loved, and we thought we'd make her part of every episode. And then, they were like, we need to focus more on these characters. But they didn't want me to cut anything. But then I realized that I have to cut both this friend character, and I had to cut everybody's favorite idea of a character. I had to cut them right out of the show, out of the pilot. Because the truth is they weren't mandatory, because the show wasn't about that character. That's a great character to introduce in episode 2 or 3. But the key in a pilot is to set up your central world, your central character, and grip us with that person and throw us right into the thick of their complexity. And by the end of the pilot episode, we should realize this person is taking a step that is going to change everything. An inciting incident happens early on. We have an arc that happens over the course of a pilot that then triggers the journey that the whole show is going to be about at the end of the pilot. That makes us ask a ton of questions. I have to find out what they do with that information next week. Oh my God, this character is going to actually do this. And then what does that mean? And what is that going to look like? Because I've already seen who this character is, and that's going to be really hard. So,
kill your darlings type.
Well, the great thing about TV is you're not killing your darlings. You take the scene, you cut, and you paste it to a side document and save it for episode 2 or 3. It's not gone. It literally will come into play down the road if the show gets picked up. You're not losing anything. You're just saving it. There's this really important phrase when it comes to writing a script. And that is, don't tell the audience a damn thing until they need to know. Until the last possible second. Don't tell them. You know why? Because until they need it, you don't need to do it. Focus on what needs to happen in order to progress the story and to keep us hooked. To introduce this character. To show us who they are. What makes them tick? What is their major glitch, their flaw? And then at the same time, you have a flaw and you have a beautiful trait. And like, for example, I'll use Big Bang again because it's very obvious. Sheldon's flaw is the fact that he has absolutely no people skills and no consideration for any other human being on the earth but himself. And he slowly, his arc is learning to care about other people. On this side is the fact that you know he's an absolute genius. He's a scientist. He's somebody people admire. He's award winning. It's just the same as House and House MD. 0 people skills, phenomenal, brilliant mind. And throughout the series, you respect the fact that he's so good at his job that you put up with this half as you're watching him have to deal with the fact that he needs to change who this is. Or every episode is going to be about dealing with the monster inside of him, the addict, the person that doesn't respect other people and doesn't trust them. And he'll use them as tools, pawn them against each other to get what he needs in order to get what he wants, which is to solve the case. And sometimes he puts other people in danger in order to do it. And he's insensitive about what he has to do to others to get what he needs to do in order to do his job. You know, House MD is a fantastic, brilliant character. So that's what your show's about. See, people get confused, by the way. The difference between movies and TV, they're both visual mediums. But in the end, movies are about telling a visual story, and it's about a plot. People go to see a movie because they see it's about an idea, and it's going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can kind of see the bounds of what that is, and we're interested in what that's going to look like and how it's going to unfold. It's a plot medium. Television, the plots change every week. What keeps them coming back is the character. Now, everybody, no matter what medium you're in, they say they want character-driven. But television is the most purely character-driven because the plots change, they rotate, they build, they change, plots come and go. But what we're watching is one person or one small group of people and how these people are dealing with the set of circumstances that you've put them in. That makes it incredibly interesting based on their personality. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It helps a lot, actually.
I'm really glad. So, by the way, guys, I cut things I love all the time, but I never erase them. Mm-hmm. I have a cut scenes file for every file of every script that I've written. For some reason, I never put those scenes back in. But you feel better cutting it knowing it's still there if you need it. And you don't need it, but you need to know that you didn't create it for nothing. You know what I mean? It's kind of this, there's a hoarder's complex sometimes with writing. And they're all your little darlings and you don't want to throw any of them away. And that's a totally natural instinct. And so don't throw them away. What you can also do sometimes is take an idea you've cut out of one script and then you wind up using it in something else you create. I have actually done that. I was writing something sci-fi or something I was writing an action western for one person, and then we got rid of a whole sequence in there that I really loved, but I realized and I agreed with them it had to go. But then I wound up using it in a totally different project for another writing assignment, and then I got paid for the same stuff, and I still got to use it. Nothing is dead. It's just on hold. Do you have any other questions, Taylor?
I'm sure I will.
Okay.
I want to talk about subtext, but I am still forming questions in my mind about it.
Subtext is tough. Just put simply, subtext, all it means is it's what's between the lines. It's saying I love you, but meaning I hate you. It's saying that's a gorgeous house, when what you're saying is I'm jealous as hell. How can you afford this? It's saying I thought your performance was really, really interesting. Which is saying I thought you sucked. It's just not saying what you mean. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's you want to say A, so then ask yourself, if this is what you want to say, ask yourself where that would lead you up here. So if I want to say, I'm in love with somebody, what I could say is, I dream that one day I'll get to see your red hair in the dawn light. When the sun sets, with a couple glasses of wine, waves crashing on the beach, and the sound of reggae in the back of my head, and a campfire just sparkling and crackling. You know, I say that, and what I'm saying is I want to spend precious time with you. But I'm not saying that, am I? I'm saying something that tells you what I'm feeling, right? So it's go up here, let the character imagine what it would be to get what they want, and let that sometimes play out what he's really saying.
So subtext, it really isn't necessarily less. It's just a different way of saying. I got really
It's
stuck
just
on
not
this
on the
idea
nose.
that-
It basically means you don't say what you're saying. Don't say it. If there's something you have to say, then show it instead. Like, for example, a character never has to say yes in a script. You know why? They can nod, and you can tell the story visually.
Gotcha. I don't know why I got so stuck on the idea that it was just less. I'm not.
You
But
can.
I was
It can
wondering-
also be less, by the way. It can be less. It can be. He stares at her for the longest time, and finally, all he can say is I should go. Or he could be saying, do you want me to go? What's he really asking? What does he want? What does he want? He wants to stay. So he's asking, should I go? You see what I mean? Because when you say, should I go? You're not saying I want to stay, but that's exactly what you're saying. And that makes it easy. It's just don't say exactly, never say exactly what people are thinking and what they're feeling and what they want. Never say those three things. You need to be able to say it without saying it.
I was wondering if there was a way that you could open up that discussion board, because
Is the
there were a
discussion
couple
board not
people-
open?
it doesn't allow posts after the due date. And I was hoping to, like, there were other people's things that I read that I just ran out of time to respond to, and I didn't get to respond to anybody who gave me feedback. But I don't know. Is that an option to open it up so we can continue playing
Yeah,
around?
I'm
with
gonna
subtext?
I'm gonna write myself a note. If you guys want to do that, that's fine. Open. So last week's discussion board. Got
Yeah,
it.
the favorite scenes.
Yeah. All right. I'll open it up when we're done. The only way for me to do that, I think, is to give you an extension. And that would allow you to go back and post on it. But another thing you can do, by the way, is just cut and paste it into a document, make notes, and email it to them. Does that, you
I
know?
honestly had not even thought of that.
What?
I had not even thought of that. How archaic email seems.
I know. Welcome to the new generation. You know, and you can also take it and you could post it on the community site. So, you know, why don't I not worry about trying to open every individual's, give them all extensions so that everybody can comment. Just take it, cut it, paste it into the discussion board, and put it there, or you can just cut it and paste it and email it to the student you'd like to help. Believe me, if every student is like me, every student wants as much feedback as they can get. The most wonderful thing about feedback is you don't have to take it. It's like a gift. So no matter whether you get feedback you like or you don't, you always say thank you because they've done nothing but help. You never have to make a change that you don't agree with. Unless it's just about editing and putting a period in the right place or making sure something reads right or getting the idea across. And a lot of times, this is what there's a great lesson that we're always taught, which is 99% of the time when somebody tells us we have a problem in our script at a certain point, they're right. And 99% of the time, how they tell us to fix it is wrong. So you always have to look through the note. You know, if somebody sends an email, gives you a note and says, "This has happened to me. We want you to kill this character on page 45," and that character plays into later on in the movie, and they're important and they have something going on, and there are things that I need them for. My response isn't, if this isn't the producer talking, by the way, if this isn't somebody that's paying me, my response is, what you realize is they're saying is that at that moment in the story, the stakes have dissipated so much that you're not feeling the pressure, you're not feeling the anxiety you should feel and involved, you're not feeling any danger, and you got to do something. You've lost the conflict. You've lost the stakes of, because people go to an action movie to see people in life and death situations. And if you haven't given them that in 10 pages, you know, they're going to be like, kill somebody already, do something. And so you have to look through the note and say, okay, the note really isn't kill this character. The note is, I'm feeling a little low on the tension scale, and I need you to put some people in danger and remind us of how important and how dangerous what they're doing is. So there is no such thing as a bad note. There's just the only mistake, the only bad thing that ever came out of a bad note is if you took it and didn't think about it, or if you don't consider it and look at the scene and say, is there a way to make that beat better? If this bugged somebody in this beat, that's why I always give my scripts, when I share my scripts with people, I always give it to 3 people at a time, because I know if 2 people point to one scene and go, there's a problem in this scene, I don't care what their suggestions are, and sometimes their suggestions are perfect and I use it. But if 2 people out of 3 are pointing at the same moment and saying, this isn't working for me, you know there's a problem. And you know you need to look at that beat and find a way to make it better and make it work and try to investigate why it's not working. It may be not working on some subatomic level, if you know what I mean, some substructure level, and it may not be necessarily in the surface, but something is happening where it's not working and multiple people are feeling that this scene needs something. And so you know, regardless of what they thought you should do, because sometimes people's suggestions aren't in league with the goal of your story or the tone of what you're trying to create. Because like, I'll have friends read my stuff and I write a lot of action adventure, but they write, you know, science fiction and fantasy, or they write dramas, or they write comedies, and their remedies will be towards their sensibilities, not necessarily towards the sensibility of what I'm trying to create. So they're usually right that there's a problem there, but then I have to figure out exactly how I need to fix it. And by the way, in the future, when you do work for people who are paying you lots of money, if that happens to you, may it happen to all of you. But when it happens, always remember that the people paying you pay you to know more than them. They actually get really upset if they give you an idea and then you just put their idea in the movie or in the script. They want you to make it better than their idea. If they could make it better and make it good enough, they wouldn't need to pay you. So our job is to always take whatever notes we get from anybody, a producer, a director, or whatever, and they give us A, and we give them, we go to B, C, D, E, we take it all the way to Z, back again, figure it out, and do something that they never imagined. They say they want to focus on these characters, they expect me to beef this up. They didn't realize I was going to take all these other characters and strip them right out of the story. But in the end, I was right. If you want to focus here, as you should in a pilot, you have to get rid of the superfluous and focus on what you need to set up the series. Only set up what you need to set up the series, and the protagonist that we're going to be with the whole time, or protagonists. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Do you have another question?
I don't want to
Monopolize?
keep anybody else from.
We'll open it up and give other people a chance. We can always come back and get back to you in a little bit. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to jump in? Going once. Going twice. We'll go back to the people who had questions. I do want to say, by the way, there were a lot of comma errors. There are the 4 basic comma types, guys, that I go over in comma time, which is a 5.5-minute video I made, that you're just literally following the script that I wrote to exemplify the 5 different kinds of commas that work, that you need to know, and then the one kind that you need to know not to do. I'm urging you to look at that video. It's 5.5 minutes. You may have to watch it more than once, but these 4 commas, if you don't know these, you can't get a job writing if you can't use the 4 basic commas. So, and there were people who helped others with the commas and making the notes. So I'm glad it helped you, Andre. For those of you watching the video later, by the way, you cannot see that there's a chat window. So if I suddenly start talking back to someone, you're like, I must be hearing voices because you didn't hear a question asked. It's because it was in the chat window, which you don't see. It's not recorded. Okay, so yeah, the 4 basic, it's simple. It's listing, comma, direct address, comma, which means when you're saying a line, when you put commas around a name, it's because it's literally a line of dialogue and you're giving an aside to a human being. It's when I say, my name is Michael, so if somebody was talking to me, they'd say, Michael, you got to hear me. It'd be Michael, comma, you got to hear me, or you have to hear me. Will you come back here, Michael? I need you. Will you come back here, comma, Michael? Period. You don't put another comma there usually because unless you put it in the middle of the sentence, like, you gotta, Michael, hear me. Unless you do it that way, which doesn't sound right, you'd put commas on either side of the name. But you gotta hear me, comma, Michael. There's a period, not another comma, because that's the end of one sentence. And then the other sentence. So there's the compound sentence comma, which is really important. A lot of people mess this up. They lose major points on the Sunday final thesis because the basic compound sentence comma and the one major comma flaw that a lot of people make are they get confused a lot. So if we can make that clear real quick. Your microphone is messing up, Jonathan Ray. Sorry, he's leaving me a text. In my screenplay, I have okay, I'm going to answer your question in just 1 second. But compound sentences is when you have 2 complete independent sentences that could have a period between them, which means it's a noun and a verb. That's all it needs. I run is a sentence, period. They ran can be a sentence. You can say they ran and they dove into a tunnel, you know. You cannot put a comma between them. A comma splice is when you take 2 separate independent sentences with a subject and a verb, and you put them together next to each other, and you put a comma between them, when it should be a period. Separate independent sentences with a period. If you want them in the same sentence, that's what's called a compound sentence. I ran, comma, and I dove into the tunnel. So compound sentences, 2 sentences in one, conjoined by and, but, or, conjunction, junction, what's your function? And then the other version is putting a comma there, but without an and, but, or, what you've done is create a comma splice, and that comma is supposed to be a period. So either make it 2 separate sentences, or use a and, but, or. And don't get confused because the other way people mess up a lot, by the way, and I'm hoping I'm not confusing you by going into this, but is when they say, John runs to the store and jumps into the tunnel. You wouldn't put a comma there because all you're doing is listing 2 actions. Unless you put a subject after the and, but, or, it's not, because you don't have a subject and a verb on the other side, it's just listing 2 actions, you don't need a comma. Okay. I hope that's clear. All right, I'm going to answer Jonathan Ray's question in the chat window is, my microphone is messing up, but I have a question. In my screenplay, I have a character that just recently lost family members, and in previous classes, fellow classmates gave me some feedback about my protagonist, Halen, not having that much of an emotional expression. Okay, if they've lost somebody, you can. People do different things when somebody close to them dies. And sometimes you need to show it. Now, other people don't if they're skipping a great deal of time after the incident. But if that moment is supposed to be defining, then you need to two things. One, establish who they are before the incident, and then express and show how they are different after the death. So, is the death? Just text me real quick. Is the death like the opening scene, or does it happen shortly thereafter, and it's more of an inciting incident where you introduce the character, then the death happens, and then they change because of the death? Is it an inciting incident, or kind of more of an opening of your movie, or TV show, or comic, or game? Opening or inciting? Inciting takes place roughly on page 10. If it's after that, say after inciting, so I just get a sense. All right, he hasn't been able to type yet. I will say that in the beginning, when if it's something in the very beginning, you would show the funeral, but like you can look at movies like what's that recent one, Guardians of the Galaxy. You open with something incredibly dramatic, which is this little boy and him going to the hospital and his mother dying, and then you cut to a giant space movie. You don't have to see how dramatically it affects him because you see how it affects him in the moment. He runs out of the hospital, collapses in the field, and sobs and screams up, and then sees a spaceship coming down or something. And then you cut to he's older. But you can tell there's an expression, and you know that the boy's going to change when he grows up because his mom wasn't there to raise him. So he's going to be a certain kind of person who didn't grow up with a mother's love. And I think that weighs in his personality as he's older in the story. But if it happens after you've introduced him, you'll want to make sure that you clearly delineate that he's a certain kind of person before the death, and then after have him act differently. It's easy to do this kind of thing, say in a movie, if it were about, like, for example, Orthodox Jews, who they cover all the mirrors in their house, they do not shave their faces, that for a whole month they don't look in the mirror, they don't shave their faces, they wear black, and they tear their own clothes. They wear a torn garment to signify that they're in mourning because a part of them has been torn. So there are ways to exemplify it visually if you give them a cultural background that allows you to do that. Some people light a candle, go to church. There are funerals, but when you set a scene at a funeral, what you want to do is you want to make sure, if you can, that there's some level of conflict even at the funeral. It's not just a scene that tells you, oh, the person died. I don't think you need to. A lot of people, a director will probably add a beat like that anyway. You don't need to write it because directors can be pretty on the nose. Our job is to create the subtext and tell the story. So you just have to make sure that a character's behavior changes when something happens that's supposed to be life-changing. Now, if something happens and it's not supposed to change their life, and for example, one of the, in what is that movie I'm thinking of? Ordinary People. What was interesting is that the mother character, played by Mary Tyler Moore, you have the son who in the wake of his brother's death, he was the prodigal son. The prodigal son died, and the one who feels like he was never the best is the one who's left alive. And he feels an incredible guilt because he was with his brother when he died. And it changes him, and he doesn't know how to get out of his agony. But what's really interesting is that the mother tries not to change, and she tries not to let it affect her. And it's that lack of change that tells you when everybody else is changing and she's not changed and she's not affected. That's how you know it's really wrong, because she's not dealing with it. She's not dealing with the pain. And then other people talk to her about not dealing with the pain and not dealing with what's going on. You have to accept him. You have to give him a little leeway. He's going through a lot right now, you know, and the fact that she's not tells you a lot, because she's hiding. She's hiding from feeling, and she doesn't want to feel it. So, death in a script. I write action movies, but death in a script is a very important thing, and it should have consequences. I think the worst thing we could do as writers of entertainment is just have a bunch of death and then not have it affect our characters. Because what we're saying is life is meaningless if we do that. I think it's important to make a death in a movie count. I think that would be a way in which we can make cinema better and make it better for humankind. Does that answer your question, Jonathan Ray? I will assume yes until you post otherwise. Does anybody else have any questions?
Side note, if you want to see death in a film really affecting, go see Big Hero 6. That hit me pretty hard.
Opened this weekend. It's in theaters all over America right now. It only did $56 million this weekend. So people are seeing it. So yeah, it's a good idea to go see that movie. Always see what's out there if you can. You know, a lot of people feel that way about. There are a lot of great movies about death. I mean, look at the beginning of Up. That just rips your heart out. And this is you know, people used to think animation was a medium for laughter and fun. I'm sorry, but 10 minutes of that movie and I was emotionally distraught for the rest of the day. But, you know, yeah, death should take a toll. And don't get me wrong, when you're writing an action game, for example, I understand there are a lot of deaths, but that should have a toll too. There should be, you know, I like those movies where you have a guy, he's this action hero, and he's done all this action. It's like Rocky, he beats people up, but by the time you get to part, you know, at the beginning of part 5, it may not, of course, be a great movie, but he's shaking, he's got problems in his head, in his hands. He's not the person he was, and he's falling apart because his body is wrecked from having spent all those years beating and taking a beating. And people should be affected by violence. And of course, that's just good writing, because that's conflict. You know, that's what we want in our stories. Did that answer your question? I hope that answered everybody's question. Does anybody else have a question? I'm going to stay here until I've answered everything. Until everybody's done. Is there anybody I haven't heard from who has a question? And it can be about whatever. You know, any part of it doesn't have to strictly be about editing. It can be about writing or anything. So I just want to make sure that, you know, you guys feel taken care of, and I want to make sure that you know that. I'm here to answer everything. I expect straight A's from all of you now. All of you.
You could just give us all A's, and that would take care of it.
Yeah, I don't give A's and I don't give F's. Students earn them both. I really. It's funny. I don't believe I really have. I can. You can give, but you can't give. You have in this business. This business is so hard, and you have to constantly be giving 120% all the time, showing that you're better than everybody. And every time you think you've created something for yourself, you have to recreate it anyway. People say I'm trying to break in, but what they don't tell you is that once you break in, you have to keep breaking in. That's the industry. You always feel like you're constantly having to. Because our jobs, people don't realize how tough artist jobs are. All kinds of artists, not just writers, but actors and directors. but we have the best of them, and because we can create our own breaks, we can create our own future, we create our own re-envisioning and reimagining of who we are and what we are as artists. All other artists usually in the industry need other people's permission to do their art. So actors have to be cast, directors have to get the job from a producer, and they need cast and a place to perform and equipment to perform it. Writers sit down at their computer and they can reinvent themselves every single day. So of all the artists, you picked a good one, but being an artist sucks also because of the fact that we're basically independent contractors and we're always looking for a job, which is why right now, while I teach you guys and while I'm doing this, I am in the background in my own life, I'm working on 3 separate scripts. I'm writing 3 things. One, because I never put all my eggs in one basket, because then you become too desperate and obsessed with its success. You never want to do that to yourself. And 2, because you just have to keep the mind going. And you don't, when you're writing on something and so you're like, this needs something. I know there's a problem here. I need to fix that. Sitting there and staring at that problem won't fix the problem. The answer to this problem only happens when you're focused somewhere else, working on something else over here. And all of a sudden, you'll be over here and you'll go, and it comes to you. So I always work on multiple things at the same time because I always have something to turn my creative energies to. I love teaching. I love doing it, but I also don't believe I'd be a very good teacher if I wasn't doing it in today's medium. That's why I'm always writing, because unless you're working in the industry, how do you expect to be able to teach what it's like out there right now? All right, Alexandra posted something in the chat window. How would you go about writing a period piece with the correct voice of your characters and still have your modern audience understand your characters? I've done this a lot, actually. I've written war epics for people. I've written westerns. I've written science fiction. Here's what you have to do. You simply come up with characters who are very specific. And, for example, I noticed, Alexandra, that some of your characters, they all talk in kind of this heightened fashion with complete sentences and no contractions. What you should consider thinking about doing, for example, is letting one character be that way. Somebody in the monarchy, somebody whatever of a certain elevation. But don't forget to let the other characters speak, because don't think that for 2 seconds in the old days, look at Shakespeare. Even in his heightened language, sometimes characters spoke and their entire sentence was a single word. They didn't all always speak in heightened language. And they didn't all always speak, even if it's practically a poem. You have to have a flavor. You have to have a sense of, you can establish it with one character, but you don't want to go overboard. You can have somebody, you have them doing things physically that make sense for the era. Back then, the rituals of the morning are different. Like when you're writing a period piece, and like for example, I wrote a war movie, and the characters in the piece would put on armor before, at the beginning of the day. I didn't just start with anything other than the opening shots are seeing the three lead characters getting ready in the morning. One of them is sleeping in, and he's snoring. Well, one is putting on is having his servants put on his armor because he's a prince and he's going to war. It's the 3 princes of a kingdom. And the other one is racing to see the sunset from a friend's balcony roof, because from there he can see the girl he's totally infatuated with wake up in the morning. Because when the sun hits her, she gets up and it wakes her up and she stirs, and watching her wake up in the morning is how he likes to start his day. So you have the guy who's all heart, you have the guy who's all chivalry, and you have the guy who is just selfish. Downton Abbey is brilliant, which she just commented on. So you go through character, you look at the rituals of the day, and you tell the story in its time what they would be doing, but that doesn't mean you have to write everybody like this heightened dialogue. Contractions are really important to making something flow. Now, if you don't want to use contractions, think about writing dialogue in ways that you wouldn't use the contraction at all. Like instead of, let's say, you have horrible manners. Now, instead of you've got horrible manners, you just say horrible manners. Horrible manners. Just horrible. So you're saying things. The key is to write things the way people are feeling. If somebody's feeling caustic, you write their language and their dialogue in a pointed way. If they're feeling romantic, I don't know why I put on an accent to say romantic, but if they're feeling romantic, they clearly become Martin Short, and I don't know why, because he's more funny than romantic. But you remember when people are a movie is all about emotions. It's about characters going through the two hours. TV is about this, except for in 1 hour. But in film specifically, because you're writing a film, you're experiencing literally the 2 most impactful hours of an entire life of a character. That's what you're supposed to be capturing. None of the BS you don't need in between. It's just about the moments that literally changed their life and how they went about changing it. The moments that change this person and who they are and how they identify themselves through an experience that hopefully we've never seen told like this before. Now, when you decide to tell those 2 pressing hours, you're not going to be filling it with scenes where people are talking hogwash. People will be emotional. What people forget, what writers forget, is when people are emotional, they do not sit there and talk in elevated, long sentences with long-winded diatribes about the things that they feel and all of what is important to them. When people are feeling emotion, people forget this. When a character is going through something, when you are going through something, you'd want to think, oh, they have so much to say. But what we all forget is that when we are emotional, we can't get the words out of our mouths. So when somebody has to protest their love, I can't express. I can't tell you. I'm sorry. I should leave. This isn't. You see, and I'm talking in broken staccatos. I'm not telling full sentences. Because when we're emotional, we can't get it. If somebody's heartbroken, it's, I can't, not now. Right? It's that simple. Or if you do want to talk, it's, he's gone. But you don't want it to be emotional. You don't want to be too on the nose. You want it to be emotional. You would say a character named Harry had passed away. Well, and somebody comes and they come over and with a look, he just says, Harry. I'm sorry. Harry, I'm sorry. You're not saying Harry's dead. The subtext is Harry's dead. But somebody comes into the room and says, I'm sorry. When the doctor walks into the room and says to the family, I'm sorry, what he's saying is, your loved one is dead. He's not saying, I'm sorry. Even if he is sorry. Does that make sense? So remember, when life is about emotional situations, people in conflict, especially in scenes, we specifically design them to be in conflict, with characters to have opposing perspectives, so that in every scene, even if they're on the same side, that there is a difference of opinion on how that moment should be gone about. Make sure the opinions are different. Make sure the stakes are high enough that it means something in the scene. Now, obviously, not every scene has to be way up here in the conflict range, but there has to be some level of conflict that is really registerable in every scene, or you don't need the scene. Remember that. It's one of the big lessons on the cheat sheet. There are 3 things required in every single scene you write. And it's really simple, guys. You can always remember this. Conflict, conflict, and conflict. That's what you need in every scene. If you have conflict, you're fine. It doesn't matter how many people are in it. What matters is that there's opposing force. There's goal and opposition. Okay. Alexandria, I don't know if you watched Downton Abbey, but that might be a good one to watch for dialect and references. But I also do want to say that that's on PBS and BBC. There's not a lot of people on this continent that get work there. You're more likely is Alexandra, if your show is a drama, try to watch an American produced period drama. Go look at Deadwood, which was a western. If it's set in Europe, if it's set in America, look at a Civil War movie. If it's set in Europe, then look at a movie that's set in its time or a TV show set in its time. But remember, you have to write for the marketplace you're going to be selling to. Brits don't buy American writers often, if at all. The market for selling material at this point in time, and for the time for a long time, has been here. Believe it or not, you're more likely to sell work to Russia than you are to Britain. Your work as a writer. And I know because I've worked for Russians. So it's because they have a specific sense and a specific sensibility, and they like to produce their own material. And if people want to shoot something in England and take advantage of their tax breaks, they have to hire English writers. That's part of the tax break. Part of the incentive of shooting a film in England is that they give tax breaks, but you would want to use an English writer because that they have to have a certain percentage of the key personnel working on the film have to be British, which usually means they want to use British writers. And if you're not a British writer, what happens is they get your material and then they hire a British writer to rewrite you. And that's probably not your goal if you want to get your name out there and get credit as a writer. You're not going to want them to do it. The show The Americans is incredible, in my opinion at least. Taylor, I'll be honest, that's one of the shows that I have not seen, but I've heard great things about it. Unfortunately, there just aren't enough hours in the day to be writing 3 scripts, teaching in a master's program full-time, and watch all the shows I want to. I watch a few. I do watch quite a few, but I don't get to watch much on a regular basis because of the workload I put upon myself to be the kind of teacher I want to be. Well, you always look at shows that you feel could help you. So, Alexandria, what is the era of your show or your movie? Excuse me, I've never had me sneeze on film before. It's very exciting. It's the first time for all of us. 1500, 1600, and what are we talking? England, Europe? Europe. Okay. So you're looking. You know what I would look at? I would look at the work of. I would look at Shakespeare in Love. I mean, that did very well here, but again, that was mostly put together by Brits. I would look at Amadeus, which was written by Christopher Hampton. I'd look at Dangerous Liaisons, even though that was set a little bit later. It was closer to the 1700s. But Amadeus, for example, it was funny, it was pithy, it was dark, it was there's a lot going on in that. But it is also based on a play, which was brilliant. A lot of people don't know the play originally was.
Is that the one with the slave ship?
No, that's Amistad.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Amistad was also very interesting, but it's not British. I was trying to keep things kind of, even though actually I think I know that Amadeus was shot in Prague, but I think it wasn't set in Vienna. It was set in, and it doesn't matter. It was Italian. It was set in Italy, I think. But
Alexandria, don't your characters eventually come to America? That was my understanding of what your script was about. Okay.
early America, the 1500s. Wait, 15 and 1600s. That's pretty early in America. That's not long after Columbus. 1492 is Columbus. So you're not looking at New York City or anything like that at that time. You're looking at you'd have to do the research, which I'm sure you have. We're talking brand spanking new, as you say. Okay. I hope that answers your questions. If you have more, feel free to post. I can tell you can't. You're not able to talk. Does anybody else have any questions? John Smith diary readings. Very good.
I'm a little curious about what you would suggest as a good approach for going into this week's editing and when thinking about sorry, my brain's
No, it's fine. Week 3. Week 3. This is the nitty-gritty week. Because next week is going to be about for the first 3 weeks we whittle down, and then the last week we build back up. And you need that last week to put everything back in proportion if you've done a really good job whittling down, because you'll cut it to below, unfortunately, minimum length. A lot of people do that. I've had students in my class cut, 100-plus page script down to their 50s. And they're like, holy crud. So you need time to rebuild and restructure after whittling down, because in the next class you have to have a script of the proper length and anyway. All right, so week 3, here's what I'll say. It's about scenes and words. One, really important, guys, never use the word is, the word are, A-R-E, and a word ending in ing in your scene descriptions. Do not use any past tense words in any of your scene. This is just for scene descriptions, by the way, not dialogue. Scene descriptions only. No past tense. Nothing at the beginning of the scene. People often think at the beginning of the scene that doesn't count because we're just establishing. It does count. Do not use past tense. Do not say bearded. They have a beard, right? You don't say past tense. You don't use LYs, and you don't use is, are, or ing. The best way to get into the beginning of a scene, by the way, is through conflict. I say this almost every one of these things, but every time it warrants saying because it's so important. So many people forget that you get into a flow. There's a momentum. Once you open the script to page 1, you're a train, you're on tracks, and you're speeding down the track, building up momentum. If you stop at the beginning of every scene to describe a setting without getting us emotionally involved first, then what you're doing is you're stopping the train every scene. So I will get into a scene through a visual that has conflict, whether it's the shadow of a knife spreading over a bed, or and then over the bed you're establishing a twin bed with 2 people in it, but what you see is a shadow of a person lurking through the window over the queen size humble bed with 2 people and a kid sleeping in it. So immediately you're setting up the tension before you get into the descriptions. Okay? And then the other thing is always remember to enter late, leave early. I've already talked about don't use any descriptions you don't need. If it doesn't give you interesting, new, unique information about the characters, or it does not progress the scene and the plot, you do not need the description. So that means you should have descriptions, and a decent amount of them, but you need to make them count. They cannot be fillers. They're not, this person takes a sip. This person paces. It can't be meaningless. It has to actually affect the dialogue. If it doesn't affect the dialogue and what they're talking about and what they say, it's not actually important. You don't need to be dictating that. everything should be kind of important to the flow of the scene and the build of the drama or the comedy. So you'll be getting rid of all the little things that you put in there that you don't need and be searching in the back of your mind for visuals to replace it that actually make sense and will key into the drama that you're telling, that will affect the dialogue you're doing. You know, if somebody is angry with someone else and you're gonna originally you were gonna have him pout, what you need to do probably is have him. You can pick up a glass and throw it at the other person's head. They duck, it shatters in the wall, and go, "You could have hit me." Then it's affected the action and it's raised the stakes. That's a physical attribute that happens. You know, somebody can, you don't want everything to be a punch or a blow or throwing something, but there are things that affect things. You know, it can be, giving somebody the bird. It can be, somebody's dancing. Somebody starts dancing, and they grab them and swoop them into a dance. That's physical. That's affecting the moment. You can have them jumping for joy. You can have them open the window and try to catch their breath, or turn on the fan because they're overheating. Or it's like, don't open that window. It's freezing out there. Everything should be grounded in affecting every moment. Everything needs to build to everything. But the most important thing, other than the specific word choices, and there are certain words that just are of no point to use, which I go into. It's on the cheat sheet. Just look at those words and literally do a find and replace and get rid of those words, because they often are totally unnecessary. You don't need to say someone stands up. When somebody stands, we assume they're going to stand up. If somebody is going to fall down, you can say they fall, because people don't fall up. When somebody leaps over the couch, you can say they leap the couch, because they don't leap under a couch. So you wouldn't say leap over. So it's a lot of stuff like that. It's still is one of those things. If somebody was sewing and then you get to them and you say they're still sewing, I'd take to tell you what, you don't need the word still, because they did it before, they're doing it now. Still is implying that you're talking about something before, when everything that's written in a script and a description should always be about the present moment, not the moment it came from. We don't talk about what happened a minute ago in the writing. A minute ago was on the page before. So don't say still, don't say again in scene descriptions. These are all on the list. There's like 10 words there, and you don't need phrases like and then. And then. Everything happens and then, because things happen in an order. This happens, and then that happens, and you've written the description, this, that, and the other thing. We don't need the words and then, because everything happens and then. That's like putting cut to between scenes, which is why that phrase isn't necessary. Everything cuts to everything in a movie. So it's totally and utterly redundant. So that's really what those words are specifically about. But the most important thing still to me from this week is enter late, leave early. The key is don't enter before the conflict has started. And then once the conflict has reached its peak, get out. Get out. Don't let the tension deplete. Don't stick around for the aftermath. You've reached the climax, you've hooked them, you've reached the climactic moment, and then let that punch its way into the next scene. Let it be the lead-in to what's happening next. Don't let the audience breathe. It sounds funny, but they'll catch their breath at the beginning of the next scene. So it's about flow and build. You build a climax of a scene, and then that'll push you right through to the next scene. And you'll be building through that scene, and it'll push you to the beginning of the next scene. It's like what you're doing in a scene is you're picking up somebody, you're wheeling them around and around and around, and then you let them fly into the pool. You ever do that with a kid? Well, that's just what you keep doing. You don't slow down before you fling them into the pool. They might hit the edge. You got to get them up to top velocity, then give them a whirl. That's what they love. They want to fly. And that's the same the feeling the audience wants to have. They want to fly. spring them forward into the next scene. By the way, another one of my tricks for doing that and to keeping the tension going is I never have a character say I'm sorry in a script, and I never have them say thank you or I apologize until the very, very, very end, until after the climax. Because things like I'm sorry and thank you and you're welcome, they're all pleasantries, and pleasantries are not for when you're going through the shit. Excuse my language. And the movies are about when characters are going through it. And then only when you're getting peace, only when you're finding resolution, should characters say words that imply resolution. Believe it or not, the word please is one I try to avoid until the very end. Or at the very beginning, right before they snap and break and go spiraling into I mean, we want people to have actual manners in life, but our job is to create tension and explosive moments that catch our breath, that make us lose our breath. And the audience wants to hear people say thank you, and they want to hear people say I'm sorry, and they want to hear the word please. But make them wait for it so it means something when they do. Let them earn that moment. And it only, if you haven't been doing it all along, does it really mean something when somebody says it. There's these great moments with great characters who you think are such horrible people, and then at the end of movies, you find out they weren't that bad, and that they felt a certain way, and that they're sorry they had to do something. But you can't tell them during the middle of the story because you're building the tension. That's your job. But at the end, if you find out something in the end that somebody's been wanting to say the whole time, or that's been really plaguing, and then they finally get to say it, then you've earned the reward of people's tears. You've earned the reward of laughter. You've earned the reward of emotional satisfaction. And that's what we shoot for at the end of a movie, is to give an audience an ending that makes them feel some sense of cathartic experience with something that never actually really happened, unless it's based on true events. But even then, you still want to make sure that you save closure for the close. Taylor Good doesn't want to interrupt. You're not interrupting. I'm pontificating. It's okay. I do that. You have to go. Look forward to. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Maybe she doesn't have to come back, but you can still listen to it. I'll stop the recording.
I do one last thing about this week's assignment.
Absolutely.
It's basically it's fine to adjust everything, ensure we have everything, or delete what we need, but you don't want any real new scenes or any new ingredients basically.
You could do that in the last week. But if you have ideas for things and you like them, that doesn't mean you don't. It takes 2 seconds to open up a file and put new scenes and jot down a note for yourself, and then go back to editing. You don't need to write out the scenes, but if you have really great ideas, it is okay to you obviously, if you have a great idea, don't not write it down. Just write down the idea and then get back to what you need to do, because remember, if you feel compelled to add a scene and you think it's really important, that's fine. But what's really also important is that you have to go back to week 1 and apply those lessons to that scene as well. Because the biggest mistake people made is they start doing story changes and don't execute the changes we've been doing throughout the class to the scenes that are new. And then they get deducted for not having integrated those notes, which they did in week 1, to the scene that they wrote in week 3. So if you do make those changes, just make sure you've integrated the note, all the lessons from week 1 and 2. But I'd make sure you get all the lessons from week done throughout the script from week 3 before you start going back and adding scenes and then trying to edit them. Another thing you can do is worry about all of week. Go through the script and get everything done from week 3. And then in a separate document, start writing scenes, and only if you feel you can get them edited well enough, insert them into the script to submit to me at the end of the week. And that way, if you don't get them fully edited, they're not in the script you're sending to me, so you're not going to get deducted. Try to protect you. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
I actually have a question.
Yay! The only Chloe's speaking. I'm waiting for you to talk.
My thesis was actually under the page limit upon coming into this class. So
Not supposed to do that.
I know. I've
What
had like
how many
such a rough
pages?
time.
How many pages?
Well, it was 88, so it's 88 pages.
That's 2
so.
pages. You're fine.
Okay.
I mean,
so
it's not fine at the end of the class, because at the end of this class, you really need to have it over 90. Because
right, no, of course, yeah. And I have ideas to basically not completely redo the ending, but I want to write. I had 2 ideas for an ending when I first was writing it, and I implemented the second one that I came with instead of the first. So I want to go back to the first, because after reading it through, I'm like, the first one was much better.
that happens to me too.
Right. So since we're pinning down this week, it's not going to be too much of an issue if I save, including those scenes and including a new ending into week 4 edit as opposed to week 3 edit.
Of course, no.
Or
Look,
should I?
week 3, I'm just making. Look, here's what I need to do. My job is to make sure you guys can do a masterful edit on your own. So I want you to turn in your best edited material to me at the end of this week. Next week, you'll go back and add to fill in the gaps of the things to make sure everything's back up to length. But at least I will know, once I've given that to you, you have the talent already and the skill set, and you've learned the lessons so that you can go back and apply these lessons to it after my class.
Okay.
But I need to see that you know how to consistently apply it to the script you give me.
Okay. So I have another question.
Sure.
I have been, after reading the material for last week and I'm getting into this week, I have been looking at my screenplay, and I feel like the focus is divided between my protagonist and her sidekick / love interest. And I feel like I devote too many scenes to the actual love interest.
Right.
So I mean, I'm just like, because at this point it kind of feels like they both have elements of the protagonist, and they both sort of propel the story. Because they're kind of like a team, and so I don't know. So that's something that I've been struggling with, is just figuring out. I have this major scene that's actually the inciting incident, and it's so weird because Celine doesn't actually make it to the event. She ends up showing late, and she's not able to. They get called out to an emergency explosion, and so Celine doesn't make it in time because she's doing other important things. And so basically that whole inciting incident basically surrounds Inky, and so my love interest / sidekick. So I don't know. So now I'm looking at it, and I'm not entirely sure if that's effective or. So that's something that I've been looking at.
2 issues come to mind. One is the inciting incident has to be the moment in which the protagonist is reeled onto their journey, or sent reeling towards the moment that they're going to have to make a decision that changes their life forever.
Right. Okay.
Does that moment do that for them?
An inciting incident for the protagonist. And it actually does. It happens like right on page 10, so that's fine.
That's fine then.
Okay, but it's just so subtle compared to this next moment, and then there's a whole big, rescue scene, and I mean, just a large chunk of the fun and games part of Act 2 kind of is devoted to this, and so the secondary character monopolizes more of the action in that, and so that's like. So I don't know. So I'm just sort of considering the subtlety of the inciting event versus this big, fun sort of get the audience to look this way.
Yeah.
At not, it's kind of like a smokescreen where I want something really big to happen and the audience to get captivated by that, and then
remind me to send you my article about who's the hero. Email me and remind me to send you the article "Who's the Hero" I wrote, and this should help you.
Okay. Like the articles that were optional reading.
I don't know if that was one of them. Who's the Hero is an article that talks about what looks like co-protagonist films
Right. Okay.
and talks about who the hero is, who the protagonist is, etc., etc. So,
Okay.
like for example, in the article, I'll you know what, I'll just tell you because everybody should hear this and it's important. Did you see Lethal Weapon?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Did you see the new rendition of 310 to Yuma?
No, I didn't. No, I haven't seen it yet.
Brilliant. See it.
Yes, of
did-
course. Oh
did
my
you-
gosh, there's so many I need to see. It's overwhelming.
I know. It's okay. And did you see the first Pirates of the Caribbean, the Black Pearl?
I did. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, so you've seen two of the three that I talk about. All right.
Okay. Good.
In both Pirates of the Caribbean and in Lethal Weapon, you have a pair of characters that look like they're both the protagonists. You have
Yeah. Okay.
you have Mel Gibson's character and Danny Glover's character in Lethal Weapon, which is Murtaugh and Riggs. Riggs is Gibson's character, Mel Gibson, and then and the way it looks is Murtaugh is the straight arrow. He is the character on the verge of retirement. He's turning 50, I believe.
Hmm.
He has a family. He's the one with a relationship with somebody who is the case is about. He gets into this case because a fellow vet that he served with, his daughter was either thrown or threw herself off the balcony of a hotel and died. And he has personal involvement. He's the one who wants to survive. He has something worth living for: family, wife, children, retirement. And then you have Riggs, who is the antithesis of this guy. So Murtaugh is the character you would associate as being the protagonist because he has the family values. He's the character you probably most empathize with or most understand, and you can most root for and understand his thinking. Then you have Martin Riggs, whose wife has been killed in the past. You don't know how she died or whatever. You just know that she's dead. And you find out in the sequel what happened to her. But and he's incredibly suicidal. He's totally off his rocker, and he dives into things ready to get himself killed. He's looking to die in action.
Right.
All right. The same thing goes if you turn around and you look at the Black Pearl, the Pirates of the Caribbean. You have on one side you have the guy with the love interest, just like Murtaugh has, who respects the family and their stature, who is in love with I think her name is Rebecca Swan. And Elizabeth Swan, thank you. Yes, and he's in love with her. He's doing it for love. He's doing the right thing. He's trying to do what is right all the time. He's trying to save the girl. Everything you think that a hero and the protagonist is supposed to be, that's him. He's the leading man. And then on the other side, like Riggs, you have Captain Jack Sparrow, who abuses women in their beds, because you can tell from all the girls who slap him, who has no scruples, is a thief, is a pirate, is doing everything to manipulate for everything he wants so he can get the treasure. Now, you see who you think the hero is, but here's the thing. The people who you think are the hero, the people you think are the protagonist, are the hero, but they're not the protagonist. Murtaugh is not the protagonist, and neither is William Turner. William Turner is not the protagonist. Do you know why? They don't have a character arc.
I'm sorry, they don't have a what?
Character arc. They don't change.
Oh.
At the end, Martin Riggs gives up the bullet from the special bullet that he had designated to kill himself with and blow out his own head.
Right.
He gives up the bullet, and at the end, Johnny Depp's character Captain Jack Sparrow has a boat
Yeah.
full of treasure and then turns around and goes back to save the kid.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay.
they're the protagonist. The protagonist is the person with the character arc. The
Okay.
hero is actually like a mentor, but not. He's the example. There are examples
Right.
of and
that is so helpful. That's so excellent because I was thinking about it and I was like, what I really want is I want two protagonists, but for them to be different. One changes, one has an arc, and the other one is the hero, so to speak. So
that's how it
that
works.
is that is so helpful. So that makes me feel so much more comfortable about the track that I'm going down because because I was thinking about placing the protagonist in the situation that I have my hero in, and I'm just like, no, I'm like, it's not. I'm like, it wouldn't be her to be in this situation,
Right.
and so that's so helpful. I feel so much better about that. Thank you so much.
You
That
bet.
really does help a lot.
Another film that there are a lot of films with that same model. Like look at Silverado. Did you ever see Silverado?
No, I haven't.
Okay, for those of you who have,
Going to see
believe it or not,
Okay.
in 310 to Yuma, when you guys watch it, you will notice that the outlaw played by Russell Crowe, Ben Wade, is the one on this side, and then the guy you think is your hero, who's doing it to pay for his family's house, he's on this side, and it's Wade, the criminal murderer thief, that is actually the protagonist. Wait till you watch it; it's great. In Silverado. Now, they're both good guys, but you have Peyton and Emmett. Emmett is the one with the brother played by Kevin Costner. He's played by Scott Glenn, and he's a straightforward cowboy, always doing the right thing, and he doesn't swerve for nothing. And then you have Peyton, who's not used to standing up to people, almost never stands up to people, but he means well, and he's a good guy. And at the end, this guy's the example, and this guy's the one who has to change and get involved and get his own hands dirty and kill the guy he should have fought years and years ago because he was an awful man.
Right.
So,
Okay.
the same thing happens with, what's it called? Did you ever see The Shawshank Redemption? Shawshank Redemption.
Right.
It's one of the best movies ever made if you have not seen it, but it's the same situation. A lot of people think Andy is the protagonist. Andy, who's played by Tim Robbins, is actually just the hero. The hero is sometimes different from the protagonist. Sometimes it's a mentor, and sometimes it's some kind of partner. Andy is, believe it or not, the actual protagonist in that movie is Red, who's played by Morgan Freeman. He's the one who changes at the end. The other,
Right.
Tim Robbins always has hope. In prison, he knew he was innocent. He always swore by his innocence. He escapes. He never gives up his dream, and he never gives up hope. He's beaten. He is raped by multiple men, and he never gives up hope. He never stops. He's the teacher. He doesn't change. Red is the one who learns to have hope.
That's really fantastic. That's really good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Glad.
I'm glad I brought that up because that really definitely.
By the way, same thing with Tom Cruise and Rain Man. Rain Man
Yes,
doesn't
yeah,
change.
right.
Raymond is brilliant. It's a great character played by Dustin Hoffman, but he's the hero, believe it or not, because he's totally honest and he lives his course. And he's not even a hero, but he's the person who doesn't change. Charlie Babbitt, his brother, not Raymond, in Rain Man, which is really what he believes was the name of Raymond when he was little. Charlie's the one who changes. Chub Cruz is the protagonist, not the guy who won the Oscar. All right.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
My
I really
pleasure.
appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked.
Yes, I'm really glad I asked too because I was definitely struggling a lot with that. So I was again on the verge of another rewrite. So you definitely saved me from that. Burning the midnight oil and writing a maybe not so good screenplay.
Well, I am very, very, very happy to have helped. All right. I thank you guys very much for commenting in the chat window that was brilliant. Mind blown. So, does anybody else? Do any of you guys have any other questions? I won't leave until you guys are taken care of.
Mm.
And if you feel taken care of, you can always, don't get me wrong, you can email me later. I'm not gone. I'm not going anywhere. But I just wanted to make sure I'm here. Alexandria says she's done. How are you doing, Andre? Are you good? Do you have any other questions? Andre's done. And Chloe, are you good?
I think, well, I'm fine for now.
Okay, great.
For now being
For now it's fine.
key part.
For now it's fine. Look,
Okay,
you guys
yeah,
have
so
my
I can't think of
email.
anything else, because now I'm just like, now I'm sort of lost in my own sort of
That's exactly what I'm
world
supposed
of
to do
thinking
for you.
about things.
That's exactly what I'm supposed to do for my students.
Great.
All right, guys.
Very good.
Thank you very much for coming. The three of you who stuck it out to the end, I appreciate it. I appreciate your verve to learn as much as you can. I'm going to try to save this and post it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess not. You guys have my email, obviously. In my very first email I sent you at the beginning of week 1 on Monday, I gave you all my cell phone number. So you have that too. Just call during regular business hours if you don't mind, East Coast time. All right. Thank you guys, and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
You're very welcome. And here. And we are going to be recording now. And we will get started immediately following. Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Tabb. I'm the instructor for editing for films, games, and animation. It includes teleplays and waves crashing on the beach. It's you obviously, and then you have